Chapter 5. Neeta! As Trish flew out of the dressing room, she saw Neeta standing in the store entrance. The last shoppers were leaving, and as Neeta hurriedly closed and locked the doors, Trish reached her at last, grabbing her in a panic. What? Neeta looked frightened now, and she was trying to pull out of Trish's grasp, trying to grab Trish around the shoulders. What is it? What the... There's someone in there, Neeta. What? Where? There, in the dressing rooms, watching me. Watching you? What are you talking about? Someone's in there. I saw... Oh my God, are you sure? Neeta gave Trish a firm shake. Stop it, Trish. Calm down. What? I'm not kidding. Someone... That's impossible. Neeta released her and started back through the store. I was just back there. No, Neeta, don't go. Trish caught her again and jerked her back. You don't know what might happen. Call security, please. Again, Neeta broke free and stalked towards the dressing area. Trish, I've been standing right there by the door the whole time. No one was in the dressing rooms except those girls. And then you. I know I'm right. I was back there. I don't care. Please don't go back there now. What was it? Neeta was still heading towards the rear of the store with Trish right at her heels. What did you see? Nothing. Trish burst out. She saw Neeta stop ahead of her, saw her bewildered expression as she looked back over her shoulder. You saw nothing? Neeta, this is no time to be technical. I know someone was watching me. I felt these eyes staring at me, and I felt this draft and... Draft? Neeta repeated dumbly. You felt a draft. Oh, I know it sounds crazy. You're right, Neeta sighs. It does. It sounds crazy. She marched up to the doorway that led to the dressing rooms and stopped again, putting her hands on her hips. Hello? She shouted. Is anyone back there? Joke's over. Whoever you are, do you hear me? Security's on the way, so get out of here now. Trish huddled against her and they listened. The silence went on and on. Neeta glanced at Trish and frowned. Maybe he's deaf. That's not funny. I didn't imagine it. I didn't say you imagined it. Come on. No. Trish reached for her friend's arm, but Neeta shook her off and stared down the hallway, slapping at the curtains on either side. Look, they're all open. How can anyone be hiding back there? The last one. On the left, the floor was ice cold. A breeze blew across my legs. Well, it's not cold now. Neeta stooped down and ran her hand over the carpet. I don't feel any kind of draft. But... Trish looked helplessly at Neeta. I felt it. Okay, so where were you standing? In that room, and then in front of the mirror. Trish moved up alongside her friend and stared into the shiny surface of the glass. That mirror, I don't know, something about it made me feel so creepy. Your reflection, Neeta joked, and then seeing the look on Trish's face was instantly contrite. I'm sorry, I know you're really upset about this, but there's nothing here. It's only because of what happened to you before. Trish, that muffin man and that weird call in the parking lot. You were back here by yourself and you were probably thinking about it and you started feeling all spooky about things. Well, then why don't I feel it now? Trish held up her arms in frustration, hardly even noticing when Neeta looked over and hugged her. Because I'm here, silly. Come on, stop worrying so much. It was a horrible joke, but he's gone now. Out of your life. Whoever he was, don't think about it anymore. You'll drive yourself crazy. Trish sighed, turning around, surveying the hall and the rooms on either side. I know you're right. I know none of this makes sense, but... I'm not saying I don't believe you. But if someone was really in here, then where are they now? I was standing right outside with all those other people. If there had been a prowler in here... he would have had to go right past all of us. Trish stood there staring. She felt Neeta put her hand on her arm and pat her gently. That dress really looks beautiful on you. I think you should buy it. With what? Trish mumbled. My looks? No, your imagination. Neeta grinned and reached out, forcing Trish to turn in a circle. I mean it, really. You look like a queen or something grand like that. I just don't understand. Don't think about it, Neeta said firmly. Get the dress. You know I can't afford it. Layaway? Mum would kill me. I'll never tell. Trish stole a last look in the mirror, saw her reflection there like some magical stranger she'd never seen before. I do love it. I do too. But no. Firmly she shook her head, ignoring Neeta's look of disappointment. I'd better take it off before it enchants me or something. Okay, if you're going to be difficult, I'll just finish straightening up. No! Without even thinking, Trish reached out and stopped her. No, wait here for me. Just let me get dressed and then I'll help you clean. Neeta grinned. Sure, it'll take me 2 years just to pick up all these clothes around here anyway. In half an hour, the store was put to rights again, and the girls locked up, strolling slowly down the deserted corridors of the mall. There was only one exit open after closing time, and that was by the theatres, a convenience for moviegoers whose chosen features ran late into the night. Pulling on their jackets, the two friends stepped out into the night, lowering their faces against the biting wind. The pale yellow moon was almost invisible now in the starless sky, and a fog had begun to drift in, making the street lamps in the parking lot seem like tall, flickering candles. Want me to ride with you? Neeta asked sympathetically, pulling her gloves out of her pocket, blowing on her fingers. I'm not sure you're in any shape to drive by yourself. We could go get something to eat, then you can bring me back to pick up my car later. Actually, yes. Trish gave her friend a grateful smile. This isn't like you, Neeta frowned, shaking her head. You're the one who's usually so sensible. You're the one who's usually so calm in a crisis. I know, it's a curse. Every once in a while I have to go a little berserk just so you know I'm human. Trish laughed as Neeta gave her a shove. The massive parking lot stretched out before them, strangely surreal in the fog. As the girls pushed their way through the small crowd of late-night moviegoers, the cars began to thin out and finally disappeared altogether. I hope your heater works for a change. Neeta gritted her teeth as a sudden blast of wind pelted them with dust and dead leaves. Beside her, Trish pressed closer and thrust her hands deep into her pockets. You know I can't make any fancy promises. If it just gets us to where we want to go, we'll be lucky. Where are you, anyway? About as far away as you can park and still work here, Trish said grimly. I was late getting here this afternoon, what can I say? She spotted her Mustang in the distance and unconsciously quickened her pace. Neeta ran a little to keep up, stumbled and promptly dropped her purse. Oh no, there goes my makeup, all my credit cards. Do you need some help? No, never mind, I think I've got them all. Here, use my flashlight, are you sure? Thanks, yes, just keep going, I'm doing fine. Trish shook her head and kept on. Just be glad everything didn't fall out of that suitcase of yours. We'd be here for the next month. Well, I like to be prepared. Neeta threw back, following her again. You just never know what might happen that you should be ready for. Too bad you don't have any hot dates in that. Too bad you don't have any hot dates in that purse, Trish laughed. Or any automatic A's for that big English test we're having next week, or what's wrong now? Stopping, she glanced back, only to see that Neeta had quit walking. The girl's head was raised slightly, as if she were listening to something Trish couldn't hear. Neeta? She said, starting back. Did you hear something? Neeta frowned. No, like what? I don't know. After another moment of listening, Neeta made a disgusted sound in her throat and started walking again, taking Trish's elbow and dragging her along. You've got me spooked tonight, Trish. I thought I heard... Oh, never mind. What? Trish repeated, exasperated. She was running a little, just to keep up with Neeta's quick pace. Nothing. Footsteps or something like that. Nothing. Nothing? Trish's eyes widened and she glanced around as Neeta urged her on. There were only a few cars now, watching them like crouched animals in the fog might watch, dull headlights like blank, dead eyes. Now you're imagining things. Yeah, I know, come on. Linking arms, they ran the rest of the way. As they neared the car at last, Trish found herself suddenly wondering if she'd remember to lock it when she'd come to work that afternoon. Footsteps. Neeta couldn't have heard footsteps, Trish reasoned to herself. There was no place out there for anyone to hide, except in the fog. And then, suddenly, he was there. Without warning, without the slightest sound, he was just there, materialising out of the fog like some phantom, standing motionless beside the car. while Trish's breath caught in her throat and she tried to call out, tried to scream, but no sound came, nothing at all, and Neeta stared, paralysed, the flashlight trembling in her hand. "Someone's breaking into your car," Neeta murmured, and as Trish watched, the figure moved slowly towards them in a tiny pool of light. Chapter 6. Trish! From some remote part of her brain, Trish could hear Neeta trying to talk, could see her friend's frightened face, could see the tall figure, statue-like, as he hesitated, not 5 feet away. "Neeta, run!" Trish cried. "Hey, don't run, everything's cool here." He came a step closer and Trish stared at his jeans and combat boots, the denim jacket with no sleeves. "Wyatt," she murmured, and Neeta jerked the flashlight beam directly onto his face. "Hey you, put up your hands," Neeta shouted, trying to control the trembling in her voice. "And what are you, the Vice Squad?" Wyatt retorted. "I mean it, up high where we can see them." Neeta pointed the flashlight like a gun and Trish stared at her in dismay. "Neeta, what are you doing? And what are you doing out here by my car?" Trish took a step towards Wyatt as he tried to keep one arm in the air and shield his eyes with the other one. "Look, you want to call off Nancy Drew here?" "Neeta!" Trish grabbed the flashlight away. "Will you stop playing with that thing? Now." She turned back to Wyatt. "Tell me what you were doing by my car." "Your car?" And Wyatt turned and looked calmly back at the Mustang. "Your car, huh?" He was silent a moment. He stared at the ground, then lowered his arms and crossed them casually over his chest. He gazed back at Trish. "I thought this was my car. Same make, same colour." "He must think we're both complete idiots," Neeta muttered to Trish. "No," Wyatt said slowly. "Not both of you." "Where is your car?" Trish demanded. He thrust his hands into the pockets of his jeans and hunched his shoulders as a cold wind blew through the parking lot. "I guess someone stole it." "You guess?" Trish eyed him warily. Her heart had begun to beat normally again, and she took a deep breath. "Why would you think that?" "Why wouldn't I think that?" He waved his arms vaguely at the empty parking spaces around them. "I left it around here somewhere. Do you see it?" "Well, no." "So someone must have taken it." "We don't believe you," Neeta spoke up. "We think you're lying." Wyatt didn't look bothered in the least. He shrugged his shoulders as if he couldn't help what they chose to think. "Maybe you just forgot where you parked it," Trish suggested hesitantly. "Maybe it's on the other side of the mall. Maybe you came out the wrong exit." "Yeah," Neeta echoed. "Why don't you just go report it to the security guards or something?" "And what are they going to do about it? Organise a nationwide manhunt?" Trish didn't know what to do. Part of her was still unnerved and suspicious. Part of her wanted to believe Wyatt and sympathise with his plight. She remembered the phone call in the parking lot and shuddered. "Come on, Neeta," she said, nudging her friend's arm. "Let's go." Wyatt stood there and watched them. Trish moved towards her Mustang and stopped. "Would you mind," she asked quietly, standing away from my car?" "No problem," he said, his hands up again, and moved backwards. "And no weapon either, as you can see." They got into the car. Trish looked at Neeta, and Neeta looked out the window at Wyatt. He had turned his back and was making his way unevenly off into the darkness. Both girls looked at each other. "Oh, Trish," she pointed. "He's limping. Did I do that to him with my chair?" "Probably. You hit the poor guy pretty hard." "Well, where's he going now? To look through his car, do you think?" "It does happen," Trish mumbled. "Going to the wrong car, I mean. I've done that myself. It's so embarrassing. I did it once. 2 kids were making out in the back seat and they got really mad at me." "Neeta, we can't just leave him there. Oh, I don't know what to do." "We shouldn't do anything. First off, he was rude to me, and then he scared us out of our minds. And anyway, he might have really been trying to break into your car. He could have just made up that story so we wouldn't turn him into the cops or something." Trish started the car, then started following Wyatt. "Maybe we should just leave," she nodded, trying to convince herself. "Maybe we should just teach him a lesson for scaring us so bad." "It is awful cold out here," Neeta sighed. She waited while Trish pulled up alongside Wyatt, then rolled down her window. "Hey you," she said. "How are you getting home?" "Slowly." Wyatt hardly bothered to glance at her. "With bruises and a broken foot." "I didn't break your foot." Neeta drew herself up indignantly. "And I told you it was an accident." I can give you a lift, Trish said reluctantly. Where do you need to go? If Wyatt was surprised at their change of heart, he didn't show it. Wherever you're going, you can just let me out there. Trish exchanged looks with Neeta. We were going to get something to eat. Do you want to come along? I'll get out wherever you eat. It will be fine. But where do you live? Don't you want me to take you home? Wyatt stopped, then leaned down and peered at them through the window. I'm not going home, he said. I'm not going home right now. Wherever you stop, it's okay. I'll ride him back, Neeta said quickly, jumping out and climbing in again before he could protest. There's more room for your legs up there in the front. Fine, Wyatt said calmly, and he got in beside Trish. Then you can attack me if I try anything funny. Some guys like to be attacked for no reason at all, Neeta said sweetly. So how about the all-night deli? Trish broke in quickly. Over on Crestwood. Wyatt leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. Cool. They rode in silence for several minutes, then Wyatt shifted, frowning down at the floor. Hey, I'm stepping on something down here. Oh, those are just tapes. You can put them in the glove box if they're in your way. Trish leaned over and opened the compartment in her dash. Unless there's something you want to listen to, Neeta. I wouldn't dream of it, Neeta said. I'd much rather listen to our passenger's conversation. He's so stimulating. Wyatt stared out of the window. You'd be surprised. Probably not. Trish made a face at Neeta in the rearview mirror and turned into the deli's parking lot. They got out of the car and Wyatt stood for a moment as if he were looking around for a payphone. Look, Trish said suddenly, if you're hungry or something, you could eat with us if you like. Wyatt stared at her. I don't have any money. We don't either. Neeta looked surprised. We use change cards. My wallet, Wyatt explained. It was in my car. You keep your wallet in your car? Neeta stared at him, then glanced at Trish. I left it there, by mistake. Then let me treat, Neeta smiled charmingly. It's the least I can do to make up for the accident today. I don't take handouts, Wyatt said. Oh, don't be silly. Neeta gave him a coy sidelong glance. I'm sure we can think of some way for you to pay me back. An equally sly smile played at the corners of Wyatt's mouth. No thanks. You can pay me back later, Trish said quickly, herding Neeta through the front door. Let's just go in. I'm starving. The restaurant wasn't very busy, and they found a booth with no trouble at all. Neeta and Trish sharing a side. Trish scanned her menu, then glanced across at Wyatt. His menu was up close to his face, but he was peering over the top of it, his eyes darting quickly around the room. Have you been here before? She asked politely. His eyes slid back to her face, making her vaguely uncomfortable. She hadn't really gotten a good look at them earlier in the eatery, but now she could see how narrow and dark they were, his brows resting low across them. Wyatt looked as though he never missed much of anything. Now he nodded. A few times. Have you ever worked at any of the other restaurants around town? Neeta spoke up. He stared at her with that curiously blank look of his, calm and totally unreadable. Neeta tried again. I just wondered if you'd worked at any of the other eating places besides the mall. Oh, that, well. He seemed to be thinking. I don't just bus tables. No? Neeta leaned forward, interested. You go to school? You have another job somewhere? Again his eyes darted quickly around the room. Trish had the sudden impression that he was committing the whole deli to his memory. I do maintenance work, Wyatt shrugged. Around the mall. I've just been, filling in for someone. What kind of maintenance work do you do? Trish asked politely. Oh, Wyatt's eyes flickered to the front of the door, to the front counter, towards the rear of the room where part of the kitchen was visible through a pass-through window. General things, repairs, upkeep, letting people into places when they forget their keys. Oh, Neeta said with a raised eyebrow, you pick locks? I can. Wyatt glanced at her quickly, then his eyes slid away. When I need to. The waitress brought their food, and for several minutes all of them concentrated on eating. Finally, Neeta nudged Trish in the side and laughed. Just think what fun we could have if we could pick locks. We could come into the mall after hours and do all that shopping. Wyatt picked up his hamburger, studying it with narrowed eyes. You wouldn't like being here after hours. I don't know, Trish joked. You're talking to two professional shoppers here. We're pretty dedicated. She waited for him to answer, but he was staring out the window, his jaw set in a tight line. Wyatt, she said gently. His head came around, his eyes sliding from the outside view back to her face. He lifted his right hand, touched the fog glass, made small round circles with his fingers. Trish could see his dirty fingernails and the way they'd been bitten down to the quick. The mole's different then. His voice hesitated, lowered. You wouldn't like it, he said quickly. It's not what you think. What do you mean? It's just a bunch of stores and food places, Neeta laughed, but she sounded unsure. It's just a place to have fun. Fun? He was silent for a really long moment. It can be fun, but nobody really knows that, Mole. Not really. Again, his voice drifted off, sank into a whisper. It has life, you know, like thoughts, like a weird kind of mind. A long, uneasy silence settled down. Neeta turned her attention back to her coleslaw. Trish sat there staring at her plate, her appetite suddenly gone. Well, Neeta announced at last, and Trish looked up in relief. I've got to get home. I've still got an English paper to write tonight. Tonight? Trish shook her head sympathetically. You won't get any sleep at all. I know. What else is new? I wish I had someone to keep me company. Wyatt finished wiping his mouth and tossed his napkin carelessly across his plate. He stared over at Trish. So where do you live? He asked casually. Me? Trish glanced up at him, caught off guard. She tossed a quick look at Neeta and said, Or do you mean both of us? Not too far from here, Neeta spoke up. Why? Wyatt shrugged. I just wondered. Is there someplace else you'd like me to drop you off? Trish asked, sliding out after Neeta, slipping into her coat. Don't forget, I have to go pick up my car, Neeta reminded her. Where's your car? Wyatt asked. Back at the mall, Trish said. But what about you? Well, he ran one hand back through his hair and glanced once more around the room. I was just thinking then, since you're not going back, how about Mayfair, the drugstore on Mayfair? Mayfair? Trish sounded puzzled. But that's right behind the mall, isn't it? Yeah. He thrust his hands into the pockets of his jeans and nodded slowly, as if trying to sort out explanations in his mind. But I just now remembered I might have to pick up some things before I go home tonight. So you actually live on Mayfair? Well, not really. A buddy of mine does, around there. He can take me home. Then you really don't need a ride. You could have just walked to your friend's house, Neeta said accusingly. No, he works nights. He wouldn't have been there. Well, do you think he'll be there now? Trish asked worriedly. He should be. He's supposed to be. Still puzzled, Trish drove straight to the Mayfair. As she pulled up outside the drugstore, Wyatt got out of her side and closed the door. So, you're going back to the mall now? He leaned over, peering at them through her window. Trish nodded. She took her foot off the brake and eased the car forward. I hope you find your car. See you later. Yeah. He stepped back into the curb, but Trish could see his eyes, dark and narrowed, watching them. He reached out and ran one hand slowly over the side of Trish's Mustang. You can count on it. Chapter 7. He's weird. Neeta glared at Trish as they went slowly through the mall parking lot. The more I'm around him, the weirder he gets. Trish shook her head. That's only because he hasn't fallen under your spell. Any guy who doesn't fall head over heels in love with you, you think is weird. I know, Neeta sighed. So what do you think? Did I make any progress? She looked hopeful, but Trish shook her head. Not one bit. I think this one's invincible. Neeta frowned. What am I doing wrong? I must be losing my touch. She leaned her head back against the seat and groaned. Why do I care anyway? I don't even think he's cute. Oh, sure you do. I think he's cute in a quirky sort of way. Quirky? Neeta echoed. Oh, that's quaint, Trish. Very quaint. Quirky. Okay, different then. Intriguing. Weird, Neeta insisted. What a crazy night. We almost get mugged and then you invite him to dinner? She stared at Trish as her friend stopped the car and lowered her head into the steering wheel. You're too soft-hearted, Neeta added, reaching over to hug Trish. You want to be suspicious of people, but you just think they're all basically good and they all have honest motives. I'm not that naive, Neeta. Someone out there planned to terrify me today and they did a pretty good job of it. Yeah, well, remember that next time you're giving people a ride. You were as bad as me. You were the one who kept coming on to him. I know, I'm hopeless. Neeta hugged her again and climbed out. This fog is really awful, and I still have to pick up Imogen clear on the other side of town. Have your folks do it. They're not home. Too bad they only make themselves scarce on weeknights. Otherwise we could have had some great 3-day parties. Trish chuckled. Be careful going home. You too. Trish waited while Neeta got in and started her car, then sat for several more minutes, watching her disappear into the fog. She leaned over and rummaged into the glove box for some tapes, then stuck one in, smiling a little at the first strains of classical music washed over her like a soothing balm. Imogen, she's been switching my tapes again. She put her car into gear and started off, heading towards the main exit. To her alarm, the car spluttered and began to jerk, and as she gripped the wheel with both hands, she felt the momentum fading behind her. Oh no, what now? She floored the gas pedal, but the car wouldn't go. With one last shudder, everything seemed to die, and the car coasted slowly to a halt. Bewildered, Trish pumped the accelerator. Nothing happened. She turned off the heater, the tape deck, and even her headlights and pumped again. Nothing. Her eyes swept over the dashboard, over the needle on the gas gauge. Half full. Damn it, Trish muttered. What is wrong with this thing? Groaning, she beat her forehead gently against the steering wheel, then looked forlornly out her window. The parking lot was a black, smoky hole around her, and as she lifted her eyes slowly to the windshield, she could swear the fog had thickened in just the last 2 seconds, swirling on forever. What am I going to do? She was whispering, angry at herself, yet trying to stay logical. The payphones in the parking lots were scattered few and far between, and she knew she wasn't close to any of them. The last thing she wanted to do right now was to go wandering through the fog trying to find one that worked. Stay calm, she hissed between clenched teeth. Stay calm, calm. She pressed her hands to her face and realised that her whole body felt chilled. It came to her then that she really had very few choices. Either take a chance walking back to the drugstore in the fog or go back to the mall and try to find a security guard to help her. She imagined what it would be like walking all alone to the drugstore and opted for the mall. The streetlights weren't much help at all. The fog was so dense that they barely showed through the darkness, and as she began walking she realised that Neeta had taken her flashlight. She walked quickly, her shoes making clicking sounds on the pavement. She'd always hated those sharp stabbing sounds in the movies. Those sounds always meant that you were totally alone and very frightened, and they echoed around you and sounded 10 times louder than they really were. For one moment, Trish actually tried to pretend she was in a movie, and her frightened footsteps were being made by someone off stage, and she was only on a make-believe set, not in any real danger at all. But of course I'm not in danger. Why should I be in any danger? The phone call today was just a sick joke, and it's over with now. Completely over with. What am I thinking? This isn't anything too scary. I've been in worse situations. People have car troubles every day. Nothing to worry about. I'll just be glad it happened closer to mall where I can get some help. Trish stopped, her heart leaping in her throat. Was that a scraping sound? She remembered how Neeta had heard something too, when they'd walked out here together from work. A footstep, she'd thought. But look around you, Trish argued to herself. Look around you, there's no place for anyone to hide. Except in the fog. Trish halted mid-stride, jamming her hands nervously into her pockets. She strained her eyes through the clammy darkness, searching in vain for cars, people, some sign of life. The theatres had let out hours ago, emptying what few lots had still been occupied, and the pale shimmer of the mall's lights in the distance seemed almost like a dream. She knew she was probably just imagining it, but all around her she felt as if the fog were inching in, closing her off a little more. Like it's trying to keep me here, like it's trying to keep me away from the mall. Trish began to run. Ducking her chin into her collar, she squinted against the mist and hurried off into the direction of the theatres. From far, far off into the night, strange noises drifted out to her, raising goosebumps along her arms. That scraping sound again? The slam of a car door? But she refused to stop and look, and only went faster. As the mall entrance came into view at last, she put on a final burst of speed and threw herself against the glass doors. Hello? Is anyone there? Can someone let me in? There was no answer. Pressing her face against the glass, she tried to see deep into the shadowy interior, but nothing seemed to be moving. There has to be someone here. There has to be. Another entrance. There had to be some other entrance where a security guard might be patrolling. Trish felt her heart sink at the thought of running clear around the mall, trying every set of doors, but there didn't seem to be any other choice. Damn, why couldn't this have happened at home? She backed away from the doors, not watching where she was going, and felt her foot come down on something hard. As it rolled out from under her, she twisted and fell into the pavement. There was a rip of cloth, and as she tried to stand, a warm gush of blood oozed over one of her knees. Wincing from the pain, she stumbled a few steps, then looked down, spotting the broken bottle she had tripped over. Great, as if things weren't bad enough already. More frustrated than ever, Trish started along the side of the building, keeping close to the wall beneath the sidewalk overhang. As she came to each new entrance, she banged on the doors with her fists and tried to look inside. Every view was the same. Wide, dim corridors, floors patterned with thick shadows, empty escalators, their steps frozen in place, uneven tiers of closed shop fronts and deserted counters and darkened window displays. "Please!" Trish shouted. "Is anyone there? Can anyone hear me? I need help, please!" She rattled the bars on the doors and searched desperately for a guard, but the only people who looked back at her were the mannequins, mocking her with painted smiles. "Please!" Trish cried again. "Someone, please help me!" "Where are those security guards?" She wasn't exactly sure just where the security officers were located. Wasn't sure which entrance would be the closest to any of them. "Please!" Trish screamed again, trying yet another door. "I need help! Will somebody please let me in?" She stepped away from the doors and continued on around the building, hesitating when she realised where she was. The dingy alleyway ran behind the south wing of the shops on the main floor and was cluttered with dumpsters and piles of old litter. Some smaller deliveries were often made here, and a line of doors opened from the backs of the stores onto the narrow lane. I couldn't be lucky enough for someone to have left one of them unlocked, could I? And then she saw a light. For a moment she thought she was imagining it, the soft glow slanting out from the door at the end of the alley. But as Trish held her breath and slowly approached it, she heard the creak of old hinges, saw the door swing outward, and stopped in her tracks as someone came out onto the stoop. For a long moment he stood there, as if listening, and then he propped the door open and disappeared back inside. "Hello?" Trish ran forward, relieved when the figure reappeared in the doorway. "Hey, can you help me? I work here and I'm having car trouble." She stopped again, several feet from the doorway. The figure hadn't moved as she'd come closer, and now as she peered into the soft light she could see his security uniform, the brim of his cap low on his forehead, the faint flicker of a cigarette ash dangling from one of his hands. He was wearing black gloves, and as Trish continued to stare, he took a step backward and reached slowly towards his belt. Trish automatically held up her hands. "Really, look, I have an ID. My name is Trish Summerfield, and honestly, I'm really having car trouble." She could see him more clearly now. He was wearing a pair of dark-tinted glasses that completely hid his eyes, and his face registered no emotion of any kind. "My car," Trish said again, lowering her hands to her sides. "I don't know what's wrong with it. I can't get it to start." She saw him nod, and he took a keyring from his belt loop. His other hand absently pulled the brim of his cap lower over his forehead. He stood aside and motioned her to come in. "Oh, I thought nobody was here." Trish threw him a grateful smile as she passed. "I was really getting scared. I didn't know what I was going to do." It was all she could do not to grab the guard and hug him. Now that she was up close, she could see the thick black hair curling wildly out from beneath his cap, and across his right cheek a jagged scar sliced down from his earlobe to his chin. Trish stared at it, morbidly fascinated, then turned her head in embarrassment. She couldn't tell if he'd seen her staring or not. "Where's your car?" he muttered. He had a strange voice, she thought, a low, guttural sort of growl, and she had to strain to really hear him. It's in Z-Lot, near the main highway. It was running fine and then it just quit. I can't believe this happened." "You shouldn't be walking out here all by yourself. You should be more careful." "I know, only this was the closest place." Trish broke off as the guard turned away. He walked off several feet, started to turn around, then stopped with his back to her. You really shouldn't be here. Not now." Well, I just thought I could use your phone. I was so scared. Of course, he said slowly. Of course, I can do that for you. The important thing is that you came, that you found me. Yes, that's how I feel too. Your knee, the guard interrupted. It's bleeding. Let me take care of you first. Then we'll worry about the phone. Bewildered, Trish looked down at her legs. Her jeans were ripped over her left knee and there was a large smear of blood clotting across the torn, dirty material. I did it when I fell. She touched her knee gingerly, wincing against the pain. I tripped on a broken bottle. I'll fix it, the guard said. Come with me. He moved off into the shadows and Trish watched him, noticing for the first time the general clutter around her. They seemed to be in some kind of storeroom, and there were stacks of boxes and crates, several huge garbage cans and shelves of food supplies. Where are we going? She asked. There's a first aid kit right over there in that closet. Don't worry, you're safe now. Trish couldn't resist another look outside as he reached over and closed the door. I don't think I can go back there by myself, she said, and saw the guard nod his head. Of course you can't, and I wouldn't let you. I just need to call someone to come and get me. I can always come back for my car tomorrow. Disappearing for a second behind a stack of boxes, he mumbled something and she moved towards the sound of his voice. I'm sorry, what did you say? I said, that'd be the smart thing to do. He made a sound deep in his throat that might have been a laugh. You'll have to excuse me. I've been sick. A terrible cold. Bronchitis, actually. Oh, I'm sorry, Trish smiled. I guess that's why I haven't seen you around here. His shoulders stiffened. What do you mean? Just that I don't recognise you. But then I only started working here a few days ago. Not everyone who works here looks familiar to me yet. I work nights, he said quickly. But then, as I said, I've been sick. It must be strange working here at night. Trish watched as he opened a door, reached inside, rummaged slowly around on some shelves. Are there a lot of guards here at night? No, just me. Well, don't you ever get scared being all alone here? Isn't it kind of creepy? No, he said again, so suddenly that she glanced at him in surprise. No, it doesn't scare me. I like it. It's much nicer when there's nobody here. You probably get a lot of things done, right? Yes, he said, dreaming of things you really want most. You do that? She smiled. He was silent a moment, then his voice seemed to soften. Yes. I do too, like a decent grade on my book report tomorrow, she laughed and added, and to get along better with my manager. She's not very nice to you. It was a statement, not a question, and Trish glanced at him again, surprised. No, she's really not. We don't get along at all. I don't know why. She makes you unhappy. Sometimes. Actually, yes. Thinking of it now. Trish sighed. See, the thing is, I really love my job. I work at Muffin Mania, and it's really fun. What I hate is going in there every day and wondering if Bethany is going to start on me about something. She sighed again and gave him an apologetic smile. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. It really doesn't have anything to do with you. She could see his stony profile and the corners of his mouth seemed to move slowly in a secret sort of smile. Come over here, he said. She moved forward, seeing the small white box in his hands. Oh, please don't bother about my leg. It's not even hardly bleeding anymore. If I could just use the phone. You don't want it to get infected, he said. He motioned her to come closer and she took another step forward. I won't hurt you. Smiling a little, Trish came up beside him. I wasn't worried about that. I just don't want you to go to all the trouble, and I really need to get home. Yes, he nodded, after I fix your leg. Puzzled, Trish watched as he turned his back on her. She heard the soft, liquidy sound of something being poured, and then he was facing her once more, holding out a large piece of gauze. This will only take a minute, he said softly. Turn this way. I promise you won't feel anything. As she nodded and moved closer to him, her arm accidentally knocked against an open crate, dislodging it, spilling its contents all over the floor. As Trish jumped back in alarm, she watched as bottles broke and shattered across the floor. "Oh no, look what I've done now!" Dropping to her knees, she immediately began picking up the shattered pieces, gathering them carefully into a pile. "Leave them," the guard said quietly. "It doesn't matter." "Oh, I'm just so sorry. I'm such a klutz." Glancing up as she apologised, Trish worked the shards onto a piece of cardboard and then stood up again, looking around the room. "Your leg." The guard moved over towards her, the piece of gauze level with her face. She could smell it from here, a strange, sweet sort of smell. "We can take care of that afterward," he said. "There, I'll just put these in the trash." Trish went quickly toward the corner, where a huge portable trash can stood on wheels. "Can I pay for the damage? I just feel so awful about this." "Come back to me," the guard said quietly. "Come back to me now." Yes, just let me do this first." Trish leaned over the trash can, the cardboard and glass held carefully in her hands. The can was already full of litter, bags and bags of it, mounded one on top of the other, so that they reached nearly level with the rim. "I hope no one hurts themselves," Trish mumbled, leaning closer over the can, carefully disposing of the sharp fragments. "You don't think anyone will reach in here and cut themselves, do?" But the rest of the sentence froze in her throat, and her mouth opened in a wide, silent scream. The topmost trash bag lay only inches from Trish's face. A long, irregular tear had already begun to separate the dark green plastic, so it was easy to see what was inside. The guard's face was staring out, eyes dull and glazed with lifeless horror. Her cheeks were scabbed over with crusted blood, and like a macabre piece of jewellery, the dark red end of an ice pick protruded from the centre of her throat. Chapter 8. As Trish stumbled backwards, she felt the guard's arms go around her, keeping her from falling. "What is it?" he said tersely. "What's wrong?" All she could do was point and cover her mouth to keep from being sick. As he pushed her away from the trash can and leaned over to examine her gruesome discovery, Trish fell back against the wall and closed her eyes to keep the room from swaying around her. When she opened them again, she saw the guard's back stiffen, saw his head jerk back at her over his shoulder, saw him straighten up again and grab the walkie-talkie on his belt. "Sam." His voice was thick but surprisingly steady. "I need help down here. Gourmet shop, the stock room." "Oh my God!" Trish whimpered, and he took a step towards her. "You've got to get out of here," he said calmly. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" "Did you hear me? You have to leave here before the police come." Is she?" Trish saw him talking, yet she could hardly hear his words, couldn't understand what was happening until he took hold of her shoulder and started steering her through the boxes to the back door. What are you doing? We've got to call the police." "I've already radioed for help. Do you understand? If anyone finds you here, they'll want to question you," he said quietly, hurrying her along. "They'll want to keep you here and ask you lots of questions. I could lose my job. Don't you understand what I'm saying? What I did tonight, letting you in like this, is strictly against the rules. I could lose my job and get in all kinds of serious trouble." "We've got to get help," Trish insisted, pulling at his sleeves, stumbling as he guided her swiftly towards the back. "Who is it? Does she work here? What could have happened?" "Listen to me. You have to listen. You have to try and understand," he repeated once again. "You've got to get out of here. My job depends on it." How will I get back home?" "I'll call you a cab. Go outside and go around the building. Wait by the theatres, do you hear me? Now what's your address?" "My address?" Trish repeated stupidly. "Where do you live? I need to know. I need to tell the cab company when I call them." "Oh, 215 Woodfield." "Will there be someone there?" "What?" "Your parents," he said patiently. "Will your parents be home?" "No, my mum's out of town. She won't be back till Monday night." He nodded slowly. "I'll call as soon as you leave, and you wait by the theatres for your ride." Numbly, she saw him pry open her hand and press the money into her palm. "Take this and just go home. No one ever has to know that you were here tonight. That will be better for both of us, won't it?" Trish nodded mechanically. I'm so sorry.
It'll be all right.
That I came in, that I found.
It was an accident, he murmured. I'll take care of everything.
What did you say? Trish felt the cold shock of air as he pushed her outside. She looked helplessly up into his face, but saw only her pale expression looking back at her from the dark glasses. For a long moment things seemed strangely paralysed, as if neither of them could move. Then the door closed and he disappeared. A gust of wind whipped Trish's hair around her face, stinging some feeling back into her cheeks, some coherence back into her brain. It couldn't be. A body? Who was that? How could it have happened? From some vague corner of her mind came the nagging insistence that she ought to know who it was, that there was something remotely familiar about the poor dead face, something she'd seen before. But it was so mutilated. How could anyone recognise who it used to be? She didn't remember getting back to the theatre. She didn't remember walking back around the building. She couldn't imagine later how she'd ever found her way so quickly through the fog. As the headlights of her cab came into view, she drew back beneath the overhang and huddled there until the driver leaned out of his window and rudely demanded to know if she wanted a ride or not. Getting home was a complete daze to Trish, images whirling and stabbing through her during the whole drive there. Strange, she thought. What peculiar things manage to stick in your mind in a time of crisis? She could see the end of that ice pick sticking out of the smeared, bloody flesh, and she could hear the low, calm tone of the guard's voice, and she could feel the pressure of his hands on her arms, on her back, as he'd taken her out of the alley. How can I act like nothing's happened? She thought miserably. It'll be all over the news tomorrow, and I'll remember. And how can I act like nothing's happened? She wished more than anything that her mother were home. She didn't want to be alone in the house. She resisted the urge to pick up the phone and call Neeta as soon as she walked in the door. Neeta would know at once that something horrible was wrong, and she'd be able to get it out of her. And Neeta had never been known for her discretion. Besides that, Neeta's parents were probably home now too, and Trish knew they wouldn't appreciate a frantic phone call at this hour. This hour. To Trish's amazement, it was way after midnight. As she drew every shade in the whole house and checked and rechecked every window and door, she reminded herself again that she couldn't tell anyone what had happened. She couldn't take a chance of getting the guard in trouble, not after he'd been so nice to her. He'd even put his own job in jeopardy to try and help her out. He'd even given her cab fare home. Strange, she'd never even thought to ask him his name. She'd given him hers, but she'd never heard him mention his name, not even once. She slept fitfully, her dreams full of terrors and grisly surprises. In one especially vivid nightmare she didn't notice the trash bag in time, and she plunged her hand inside, touching the dead face, drawing her hand back again with pieces of bloody skin stuck to her fingers. Gasping, Trish bolted up in bed, her nightgown soaked with sweat, her heart pounding. The clock read 3. The house was huge and silent. Oh, Mum, of all times for you to be out of town. She saw the sun come up. She heard the newspaper hit the front porch, and without even bothering to get dressed first, she raced outside and opened it to the front page. Politics, bomb scare, blizzard in the northeast, but no murders, nothing about the mall. Bewildered, Trish went back inside and pored over the paper from front to back. The only mention at all about the mall was the huge sidewalk sale scheduled for that weekend. No mention of bodies or accidents, no mention of foul play, nothing. Maybe it didn't make the morning edition, she told herself. For some strange reason, this particular murder just didn't make the morning deadline, but it must have made the morning broadcasts. She turned on the radio and listened while she dressed for school. All the usual stories, the sports, the weather. The mall wasn't news today. She could hardly concentrate in class. The book reports went by in a blur of garbled discussions she couldn't even hear. Neeta kept throwing her questioning looks while Trish stared back blankly, and Imogen even had to remind her to change for the last period of volleyball. "What's the matter with you today?" Neeta chided. She gave Trish a ride to work. "You act like you're under an evil spell or something." "Have you heard anything about the mall?" Trish gave her a puzzled look. "Anything at all?" "Well, yeah, the sidewalk sale is this weekend, and it's going to be a nightmare." Neeta looked at her strangely. "Why?" "No reason. I just wondered." "What happened to your car anyway? How come you needed a ride today?" It's broken. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with it. It broke down on me last night at the mall. You're kidding. You mean right after you dropped me off? Trish nodded vacantly. It's okay. I called a tow truck and it's at the station now. You can drop me off after work. What did you do? Neeta persisted. Why didn't you call me? I called a cab, Trish murmured. I didn't think you'd be home yet. It was late and... Trish, that was so dumb. Anyone could have come along and just snatched you off the street like that. Neeta gave her a stern look. Next time you call me, I don't care how late it is, you could have left a message. Someone could have come and gotten you. I wish I had, Trish said solemnly. But really, Neeta, didn't you hear anything about the mall today? What's with the mall anyway? I told you, just the sidewalk sale. Yes, Trish murmured. That's what I meant, the sidewalk sale, I mean. I just wanted to make sure it was this weekend. Neeta gave her a funny look and jabbed her in the side with an elbow. Wake up, Trish. Focus in here, girl. You can't take on Bethany in this condition. And it was strange, Trish thought, trailing along after Neeta through the parking lot, through the bustling corridors of the mall. How normal everything looked this afternoon. She'd expected to see police swarming everywhere, crawling through the stores, up and down the alleyways, searching storerooms and trash cans and loading docks and even delivery trucks, standing thick with notepads in hands, questioning innocent shoppers as they hurried past. Excuse me, ma'am, do you know anything about the dead girl in the garbage bag? When Neeta grabbed her to get her attention, Trish nearly screamed at her. What is wrong with you? Neeta demanded, patience wearing thin. You're acting so weird today. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about other things. Obviously. Neeta shook her head and stared up the escalator, leaving Trish to go to the opposite direction downstairs. Eat a muffin or something. You don't look too good. Oh, Neeta, if you only knew. Trish nodded and began to walk towards the eatery, weaving in and out of the crowds, keeping her eyes open for the sight of a uniform. She couldn't believe it. Not a single policeman anywhere. And then another thought struck her, and she stopped mid-stride, not even conscious of people glaring and running into her. She searched until she spotted a security guard near one of the water fountains. Forcing herself to be calm, she walked over to him and excused herself. Hi, I work at the eatery. She stopped and took a deep breath, encouraged by his friendly smile. He was older and grandfatherly. His kindly eyes twinkled as he gave her a nod. Can I do something for you, young lady? Well, that's just it. I had some car trouble last night and I was leaving. A white lie, just a little one. And one of the guards helped me. Well, I should hope so, he grinned. That's what we're here for. So I was just wondering, Trish went on, if I could thank him. It was really nice of him and I thought, well, that's awful nice of you. And just who was this gallant gentleman? I don't know his name, but he was tall, had sort of curly black hair, long and... That'd be Roger. The guard didn't even hesitate. Roger. Only one I know who did that funny hairdo. Do you know what time he comes on duty? Time? Why, he's here now. As a matter of fact, he's just getting ready to go off. Looks like you caught him just in time. But... Trish started to say more, but the guard started off, motioning her to follow. Hey, he shouted as he saw a tall figure standing outside the pet store. Roger, got a young lady here who wants to see you. Thanks, Trish smiled. Thanks very much. No problem. The guard touched his cap and went on his way, and Trish continued over to where Roger was waiting. Hi, she said, and her breath came out in a rush. Am I ever glad to see you? She broke off then, and a tall man looked down at her with a polite smile. He wasn't wearing a cap, and his thick black hair curled out all around his face, but instead of the dark glasses, a pair of clear green eyes looked down at her curiously. For a long moment she gazed up at him, her mind racing furiously. Something's not right. Something's not right at all. Can I do something for you? Roger asked. His voice was loud and strong and friendly, with a hearty laugh behind it, and as Trish kept staring she tried to talk but couldn't. Hello? Roger teased, leaning down a little. Leaning down just enough so she could really see his face, his fair cheeks smooth without a hint of a scar. I wanted... She was stammering now, but she couldn't help it, and suddenly, more than anything, she wanted to turn around and run back to the alleyway to look in the dumpster parked outside the back of the gourmet shop. I'm sorry, I thought you were somebody else. Too bad for me, Roger grinned, and he started to turn away. Trish suddenly reached out and grabbed his sleeve. You don't work at night? She burst out. Here in the mall, the late shift? Late shift? Roger repeated. You mean the one that ends at 10:30? No, midnight, after midnight. You must have this mall confused with another one. He shook his head apologetically. Another one? What do you mean? I'm talking about the guards who stay here on duty all night. Sam, someone named Sam, and that other guard. The other one, you must know who I mean. The guards who stay here till morning. No. Roger shook his head, his smile slightly amused. I'm telling you, you must be talking about some other shopping centre. After 10:30, this whole place goes on alarm systems. We don't have any all-night guards here at the mall.